It it now turns out that that Justin Raimondo's internet site, antiwar.com, is being monitored by the FBI, and who suspect him of being in the employ of foreign powers, simply for opposing the war. And we've had well-known, internationally known law professors put on terrorist watch lists because they refuse to be informers on their clients. In other words, you know, one of the requirements of being an attorney is you respect the attorney-client privilege. And yet, when they refuse to violate this and not rat on their clients, they get put on terrorist watch lists. Well, these are amazing developments for a country that claims to have freedom and democracy and a rule of law and accountable government, and yet nothing results. So it looks like the United States is committed to wars which are exhausting us economically, exhausting resources. It's produced budget deficits and debt ceiling crisis that threatens the social safety net. It threatens the dollar, which is the world reserve currency, so it threatens the entire financial system of the world. And everybody's rights are disappearing. We have to, if you want to fly, you have to go through a porno scanner or else sexual groping. All of this is an absurdity. And yet we can't look at the cause of this. This strikes me as a huge failure of an alleged democratic system.
Well, that is exactly the point, I think. It is rather overwhelming to think of all of the different ways that 9/11 has affected our society, and yet whenever anyone tries to raise any questions about what happened that day, they are immediately dismissed by the both government spokesmen and their lapdog media, which seems to be completely, utterly in line with it. So let's just get back to what you were saying earlier, because I would just like to stress that everything you just said there is absolutely non-controversial as matters of fact. And yet it would be quite roundly dismissed by any type of media discussion on the issue. But getting back to the 9/11 commissioners themselves, I mean, some of the actual quotations of what they actually said are so startling, and I think very few people have really taken the time to actually study what the commissioners themselves said about their own commission. Of course, there's the famous quip from Hamilton and Kane that they were set up to fail, but there are other startling admissions as well, including John Lehman, who said that we purposely put together a staff that had, in a way, conflicts of interest, which is a rather stunning admission. And the senior counsel to the commission, John Farmer, said, quote, "I was shocked at how different the truth was from the way it was described. The tapes told a radically different story from what had been told to us and the public for 2 years. This is not spin. This is not true." And just quotation after quotation from the commissioners themselves showing that there was a concerted cover-up going on at various levels of government and within their own commission to keep the truth from the people. And yet, despite this, again, people are dismissed for having any questions about that. That's a remarkable state of affairs if we take the proposition at face value that the media is still an independent entity that's out there fighting for the public interest. But I guess we pretty much have to dismiss that notion now that the last 10 years has proven that the media has become warmongers and basically spokesmen for the government, hasn't it?
It's a ministry of propaganda. It's, you know, what Gerald Celente calls them prostitutes. You know, what I find is you're not even allowed to report what experts are finding. See, what I do is simply report. I haven't made any independent investigation, but I had enough questions just in my own mind. I mean, I went to Georgia Tech, and when I saw those buildings coming down, I concluded they were blowing up. They weren't falling down. And so it made me interested to see what experts, people who knew far more than I did, had to say about it. And so I thought that reporting expert opinion would be of interest. But I ran into a brick wall. There are a number of sites that simply would not permit me to even report, without myself coming to any conclusion, what experts were saying. So if you can't even, in other words, and I'm now called a conspiracy theorist simply because I reported what experts were saying, questions they were raising. So if you actually raise a question, you actually do research, you must really be on a blacklist somewhere. But the pressure is very strong not to even report it. We're supposed to be silent about it. I mean, I experienced this just from internet sites, from readers, even from my former friends in Washington. You shouldn't be talking about this. So this shows an emotional inability to come to terms with it. It's not clear that it serves any broad spectrum of interest. It serves the neoconservative American hegemony goal. It serves the military security complex. But it's not in the public's interest to put the social safety net under pressure, have the dollar declining in value and inflation from the dollar's fall, or these huge war expenditures that have to be financed by printing money. So what interest is served by this view that we have to fight forever against terrorists who blew up the World Trade Center? It doesn't seem to be a very broad spectrum of interest served, certainly not the national interest. But to come back to your points about the commission, chairman, co-chairman, the senior legal counsel, I think perhaps one of the reasons that their statements didn't produce more result was that they themselves have not questioned that it was done by Al-Qaeda. And so I think people say, well, they support in general the theme that the Arabs attacked the buildings. But you would think that the question that should have come up is, well, look, if the government would lie about things of less importance, how do we know they didn't lie about things of greater importance? And why did they have to lie at all? I mean, why did they have to, if, you have to have some explanation of why there was such total intelligence and operational failure. And if you're going to say, well, it had nothing to do with our competence, and so you lie to cover up incompetence, then you would also lie to cover up complicity. And yet, this most obvious aspect has never come up. You see, I've never seen a discussion of why did the government have to lie to the commission, or if they didn't lie, why does the commission think they lied? And if they'll lie about an explanation that doesn't challenge the overall explanation, why wouldn't they also lie about the overall? So there's so many things that have just been ignored that are of amazing consequence.
That's very true, and you make an extremely important point that that a cover-up from the outside could either be a cover-up of incompetence or a cover-up of complicity, and it's impossible to determine that without an investigation of the cover-up itself. But of course, even getting people to look at the cover-up is something of a challenge, let alone to start asking the questions of what's behind it. And certainly the raising the specter that Al-Qaeda itself wasn't behind the attacks, or there was other forces involved in what happened that day is completely beyond the pale of any sort of mainstream discourse, and again goes to show just the ways in which media and the conversation at large can be framed in such a way to keep people away from those types of issues. But I guess one of the issues that often comes up in that regards is the destruction of the buildings, because as you point out, there are so many different factors that point to the fact that Those were not simple collapses due to fires. They were something else. And that necessarily raises the prospect that there was other forces at play that day. And I would like to commend you for bringing up in your article the very important fact that NIST, in fact, did not really do an investigation of the collapse of the building. What they did was come up with computer models that suggested that the building may have collapsed in a certain way given the right conditions that they plug into their computer models, and that's basically the some extent of it. And another thing to add to that is the amazing, incredible fact that to this day NIST has actually refused to release the computer model data that they used for their WTC7 collapse computer model because it would endanger public safety to release that information.
Right.
It just boggles the mind that anyone could possibly buy into that type of blatant lie.
Right. They can't release it because it's just a simulation and the assumptions produce the result that they want. That's what happens generally with simulations. And, another thing, James, is that there's still no explanation, no official explanation for all the molten steel. We know for a fact that the evidence is overwhelming that weeks after the buildings came down, when they're still clearing the rubble, there's still molten steel running. And as some of the workmen who were there and saw it said, it was like a foundry. It was molten steel running along the channels. And this is weeks after. So obviously there had to have been a huge temperature such that even after weeks of cooling down, the steel's still molten. There's no explanation for this. I mean, everyone that knows anything knows that an office fire or a building fire can't possibly melt steel. And so the NIST initial reaction was there's no molten steel. But there are photographs of it. You can see these cranes lifting stuff up, and there it is. There's the molten steel. It's red hot, and there are all the statements from the companies doing the cleanups and the workmen. And so,
and most importantly, sorry to interject, but most importantly, video has recently surfaced of a speech that a NIST investigator was giving, in which he admitted there was molten steel. So, although they do officially deny it now, they have in the past admitted that there was molten steel.
Well, there's no explanation, and I don't think that we'll ever get an explanation from the government. It's like the John F. Kennedy murder, or it's like the Israeli attack on the USS Liberty. Despite all the evidence, the government still says, oh, it was a case of mistaken identity. So, and any government, any future government seems to stick to the story of the original government. So if the Johnson administration concludes that Oswald killed Kennedy, then that's the conclusion for all time. And even if the vast majority of the people no longer believe it, it's still...
Even if the House Select Committee on Assassinations officially concludes that it was the result of conspiracy, they still won't admit that it's a conspiracy.
That's right. So I don't think... And certainly the groups trying to get an independent investigation will not get one. But the evidence may continue to mount. And over time, as people get distant from the event, it will be another story of where the government obviously didn't give a full account and didn't tell what really happened. So, it's kind of like the Reichstag fire. A lot of people still claim that the crazed alleged communists burnt the buildings down, which was what Hitler claimed. So you can never really get these things officially admitted. And in the case of 9/11, the technical and scientific aspects are over the head of most of the population.